Welcome back to another episode of the Huxley Morton podcast, the show where each week we speak to pharma company owners and industry leaders sharing their stories of personal and professional growth. This week, I'm joined by a recruiter, but not just any recruiter. We've got Ross Jackson on the show. Ross is literally the man who wrote the book on patient recruitment. I'm also joined by Adam Walker. We kicked off a moment ago, kind of before we were on air. It seems that my co-host and Ross already know each other, so I'm sure this will be an interesting one. But Ross, I've given you a short intro there. Who is the man that has literally written the book on patient recruitment?
Yeah, okay, yeah. So I've been, yes, I did write the book. I took some time during lockdown to write a book on patient recruitment last year. It was quite fortuitous. Well, the lockdown wasn't, but the time available to write the book. So yeah, I've been working in lots of different things over the years. I've spent 20 plus years in digital marketing. A lot of that time working in healthcare and actually recruiting patients for private hospitals and things like that. Mm-hmm. Until I came across the clinical trials industry and got a job through an agency, a freelance job, recruiting patients using digital advertising methods, mm-hmm. such as Google, but then Facebook started to be a good advertising platform to use for things. My background had primarily been in lead generation, so I thought, this is a good combination: lead generation, patient recruitment. So I started to do that, realized I was good at it, and focused on that since then, hence getting to where I am now and writing the book.
Incredible stuff. I mean, not all of us took the time to write a book during lockdown. I certainly got quite active with exercise, but yeah, I guess that must have certainly kept you busy, Ross. Now, look, who is it that you're working for now? So heard there that you have been a freelancer for many years. Digital marketing was the background, but what's the company nowadays?
Yeah, well, I earlier this year, I've been in touch with this company for a while. They're called Prime Global. There's a medical communications agency, quite well known. They deal with, virtually all the top pharma companies. So they're well known in that sector. And they've been looking to build up their patient engagement and recruitment service. Mm-hmm. I've been in touch with them for a while, and we were just chatting earlier in the year, and it just seemed to make sense for me to work with them to utilize their skills, their expertise alongside mine to help, take me a bit further. As a freelancer, you can only get so far. But now with this extra organization, it seems like a perfect combination of things. So I'm now their vice president of patient recruitment services.
Wow.
Prime Global. Yeah.
Well, look, I must admit, I had not come across Prime Global previously, but I know, Adam, you certainly had come across Prime
Absolutely.
Global. So give us a bit of an insight on those guys, if you can, or if between yourself and Ross, that'd be sort of useful to hear.
Well, I mean, for full disclosure, as I said before we joined the pod today, Ross, I did an engagement with Prime about six plus months ago, something like that, maybe 9 months ago, I think, when I was originally engaged with them. And they're a fascinating company. They seem to be going places. They have some financial backing, significant, and they are market leaders in their space. And I wasn't aware of them until I engaged with them. But as you say, they're going places, and clearly, having looked at your profile and familiarizing myself with your profile, it makes sense, and it seems like a perfect fit, your skill set with the requirement that they have to engage with patients. So it seems like a match made in heaven, just from the outside, as I say, and knowing the way and the people that they have within their organization. And I was extremely impressed with their personnel and the manner in which they've been going about their business.
No, I'll certainly echo that. It's been great to have worked with them. Just recently but I've known them for a while. But yeah, I mean, all the people there are great to work with. They're all very talented, a lot of expertise. Like you say, they got some investment. This is not secret news. It's on their website, earlier in the year. So they're looking to expand I think they've been in the top 10 healthcare companies for growth for the last few years. So in the Sunday Times list, and there's an American list as well. So they're definitely going places. It seems to be, it's a great place to be.
Fantastic stuff. And look, Ross, I guess, look, with the intro, we talked about the book, and we'll perhaps get into that in a bit more detail. You mentioned that your background has been digital marketing for a while, and you kind of stumbled across the patient recruitment side of things and the link to Facebook. But if we were to kind of go back before to all of that, how did that come about? You know, what led to that point? Where did you see that similarity? Where did you spot the opportunity? Because yeah, so much in life, it's a case of being in the right place at the right time. But you know, on top of that, I think a lot of the time you need to be aware that you're in the right place at the right time. So how did you spot that?
Well, originally in the digital marketing, I was I was quite early adopter for digital marketing. So I was actually promoting websites before Google existed, which is quite bizarre. From 1998, I've been doing that. And I just started to build up things along. And that was quite fortunate that I was there. I just happened to be, this would be a good thing to do. And then through various clients I'd worked with and agencies I'd worked with, got to know about the healthcare space. And then, well, the clinical trials one came out of the blue. I wasn't overly familiar with clinical trials in reality. I think I probably knew they existed, but I just thought it was something that somebody else did. I think it's quite a common theme for the industry that people come into it from other things, and that's how it worked. I did it through an agency, and I thought, well, this is a great match for what I do, and it's actually something nice. I like doing things that are giving something back. I like the idea that we're hopefully developing treatments for conditions. So I thought, yeah, and then I got another one, and then another one, and then it just came on from there. And I just thought, this is an industry that I like working in. As well as Prime Global, the actual industry itself seems to be populated by nice people like yourselves. So it's a good space to be, and that's what I did. I just thought, right, I'll take that opportunity, I'll focus on it, and it's worked to get me to where I am now.
Wow. And you know what? I have to mirror that. There's a lot of, I think, whether you call it nice, certainly like-minded people in the industry. You know, everyone seems to have a common goal. Everyone works together. Everyone seems to network, and it becomes almost a little bit incestuous. I mean, you know, us three were talking just before we kicked off here about kind of who we know, who we've met, and it's a small world at times. The fact that, you know, we're all talking about guys that we know over in the States. You know, you guys have worked at similar companies, so it is a fantastic industry to work in. So how has that developed for yourself now in terms of, you know, talk us about, I guess, you know, that we know your background now, but talk us about how that switch led to the book, the Facebook marketing, which is a whole, perhaps almost a seminar on how that all works, because I've tried to delve into that myself previously. But look, talk to us about where you found this niche for yourself, and where the book was born. Where did that come from?
Yeah, so I'd worked at different levels within the clinical trials in particular. So I've worked directly for sponsors, I worked for CROs, and I worked for research sites. And I thought, okay, this is an interesting model here. Like, there's 3 layers going on. I'll probably get onto something about where I think it's heading in the future at some point. But for the moment, that's what seems to be happening. And I thought, well, this is an interesting model to use. I looked at it and decided the sponsors seem to have all the money, CROs seem to have all the business, and the research sites are the ones at the bottom end who sort of, I like dealing with the sites because you can get things done quickly, but they don't have the same resources. So I was thinking, well, how can I get more work from sponsors directly? That was what I was thinking. A lot of the time, the work I was doing was from CROs where the trial was in rescue. So they thought, we need to get lots of patients now because deadline's 2 weeks away. How do we do it? Let's try Facebook ads. That's where that sort of came from originally. And then I had a bit of a reputation in the industry, and other agencies knew I was doing it. So I'd be approached to come in at the last minute to try and get we need 50 patients this week. Can you get them through your Facebook ad skills? So I thought, well, okay. I'd tried lots of different methods of recruiting patients, but certainly, well, lots of digital advertising. And then I'd also worked on projects where there was radio ads and press ads and other things. But the digital outreach certainly seemed to work better than anything I knew of, and Facebook in particular. Certainly from, I'd say 4 or 5 years ago, that was the case. Facebook was the one driving the most participants into trials. Mm-hmm. So I thought, how can I do this? I'll use my Facebook skills to approach different levels of business rather than just coming in at rescue stage. Let's try and do it from the start of a trial. And that's what led to me writing the book. I was been thinking about writing the book for years. I eventually did. Now, the problem with having written a book, it's a printed book. So I'd encourage everyone to buy it, obviously, but it's already slightly out of date because of things that have happened since it was published last June. So I post blog posts with bits of updates and other things.
What's the name of the book out of interest, Ross? Just so we know for the audience, because I'm assuming it's available on Amazon and places like that, is it?
It is. I mean, you go to Amazon. It was an Amazon best-selling book when it was released. It's probably quite a small niche market, but there you go. I don't always say that.
Don't play down too much. Don't play down too much.
But if you look for it on Amazon, it's Patient Recruitment for Clinical Trials Using Facebook Ads by Ross Jackson. I've also, if you just patientrecruitmentbook.com goes to my webpage about it.
There's some great reviews on there, Ross. I will say that. I had a little look, and a number of people said, if ever you want to do this, this is the book you need to read. And I don't know whether people actually knew whether they needed it. As you say, it is quite niche, but nevertheless, there are some key take homes which I think center around cost per patient enrolled, cost per patient randomized through to studies. There's an awful lot more effort that goes into radio and TV and newspaper ads than there clearly is in a targeted manner towards Facebook. Is that really at the crux of this?
I would say that's why Facebook works in reality, yes, because it's half the world's on Facebook, almost half the world's on Facebook. And if you're not personally on Facebook, you almost certainly know someone who is. So the beauty of the ads is that if you're not even on Facebook at the time the ad is shown, someone will see it and forward it to you, so you can share ads.
Yeah.
Also, if someone sees an ad and they recognize this particular condition, okay, I don't have it myself, but somebody I know does, I'll let them know about this. So again, it's a great way. It is a social platform. It's a very social way of sharing ads. If to see a TV advert, you have to be watching the TV, and then to remember it, you have to remember the web address or write it down or whatever. Facebook, it's there, and you can copy it and share it. So it's even before I was doing predominantly clinical trials, for a couple of the other things I was doing, I thought Facebook is working very well as an advertising medium.
Well, I mean, you touched on the transferable skills, and automatically I'm thinking, well, I'm clearly, as you are, embedded in the clinical trial world, but I'm thinking, where else and how else could this be adapted? Because there are many other businesses and enterprises out there that could clearly do with that kind of focused advertising for a niche market, whatever that might be, based upon various criteria that you're able to drill into.
Yeah, and it's another key factor. It's one of Facebook's killer apps, really. When it was first came out, Facebook advertising, was that the targeting you can do is brilliant, because they've got so much data. They have so much data about their users, and there are so many users. So you can target people by interest, you can target people demographically, age, gender, that sort of thing, location, obviously. You can, but to the point where you could target people who are interested in watching particular TV programs if they have that data with it. And Facebook draws their data from pixels around and cookie type things that are around the internet, also within its own system, which there are more people using Facebook than anything else. So within its own system, it knows that. There have been some updates recently. People might be familiar with the Apple iOS 14 update, which has affected things, but fundamentally the basic principles are the same and the basic results have been the same.
What was the huge deal about that, Ross? So look, it's not the advertising and patient recruitment. It's not my business. Hence why I've not really dived into it personally, because I've got enough to worry about running my own business than what's going on with Facebook. But I did notice, even on LinkedIn, a lot of people mentioning this and saying, "Is this going to be the end of Facebook ads?" So what was the big hoo-ha about, and what's your take on it? Clearly, you don't think it's going to have a huge impact, but what was, I guess, where did maybe the anxiety come from people that, they heard this, and often, it's that panic and herd mentality that can, cripple something. So yeah, talk to us about that.
Okay, so the iOS 14 update basically was about privacy. So when people updated their Apple iPhone, Apple system, it came up and said, it's asking them whether they want to be able to be tracked for advertising, is basically the crux of it. And the choice is yes or no. And it's about third-party tracking, so it's on different websites. So like I mentioned, the Facebook Pixel. You could put the Facebook Pixel on a website about something, let's say the BBC website. Well, you wouldn't put it on the BBC website, but it could be on the BBC website. So then Facebook knows you're interested in the BBC because you visited it and the pixel's on there. What Apple was telling its users was, do you want this to be able to happen to you or not? And even before the update had happened, people realized, well, most people are going to say no because they don't understand it for a start. They don't know. Me personally, just to go off on a little tangent on that, it's better to actually have targeted advertising than not targeted advertising, because you still get the adverts. You're not saying I don't want to see adverts. You're saying I don't want to see adverts based on this particular type of tracking. So,
I agree, Ross, and if anything, I'm firmly in that camp. That's how I do my shopping.
Yes.
If I know that I want to buy something, I'll tap it in to Google, and I know that within a couple of days it's going to filter through to my apps, my LinkedIn, my Instagram. It saves me a load of time. I'm quite a big fan about it. I don't know about clearly you are, Ross. I don't know about yourself, Adam.
Well, I've had positive experiences. I don't think I've had too many negative experiences around it. But what I'm noticing recently, and what I keep hearing in the public domain, is just that generally phones are picking up on the language that we're using and the words that we're using, and there are artificial intelligence and machine learning algorithms that are working upon listening to the dialogue that they hear from us directly. And a classic example I have recently was when I've been talking to my sister recently about a new puppy. So she got a new puppy recently, and blow me, a couple of days later, we'd had a number of telephone conversations, and then suddenly all my Amazon recommendations were how to train your new puppy. And guess what I then did? Of course, I bought her the book. I sent it to her. She then replied back to me, put it all over Facebook, put it all over Instagram. And so it perpetuates. That is a classic example. Now, I don't have a problem with that particularly either, because it just took the thought out of it. It made it straightforward. But also I got incentivized. It was discounted. So it wasn't, an astronomical price. I thought, you know what, one click, bomb, I'll send it to her. And sure enough, it had the positive outcome that I'd hoped for. So that's a classic case in point. Now, some people are pretty anti those kind of approaches, but it seems to be the way that the world is translating itself now.
Yes, it definitely is. It's already there. There's this machine learning and artificial intelligence for that sort of things there. Whether it specifically is listening to you is an argument for a million Reddit forums, but it's there's lots of people are saying whether it's listening to you, or it may well be that you've actually searched for something and just forgotten and remembered the conversation. That's a different issue. But
I can categorically tell you I've not searched for anything on puppies. I've got 3 dogs myself, so I don't need to know about puppies. This was the thing. We'd literally had conversations about, you might want to think about certain types of milk to make it sleep better. You might want to think about, various other things that we were talking about. And sure enough, it's almost as if there is like a categorization within that.
I think that's amazing. I love that sort of thing.
Incredible.
I'm like, fantastic, keep it coming. But look, Ross, back to you, because I think that there is a lot of people out there that aren't so keen on that and don't like the idea of the big brother eye, knowing what we're doing and to an extent almost manipulating it or making use of that to their own profit and gain. Someone's got a few quid out of Adam for a puppy training book there, which he's quite happy about, but other people maybe not so. So if you could keep elaborating on that as you were before we jumped in with our own experiences.
Yeah, so that sort of privacy issue is what most people are saying, no, I don't want this. And even like you say, even if they do understand what it actually means, they're saying, okay, no, I don't want, because I don't want this privacy interrupting my life. I don't want the Big Brother style. So that means that then Facebook wouldn't use that data. They introduced this horrifically awful thing about aggregated data that is like, they're doing aggregated data, so anonymous data with pools of people. So it's not about a specific person, it's about someone who, this person behaves a bit like he is likely to be in this group of people who like this website. So we can still show the advert to them rather than specifically knowing, yes, they visited that website, so they are going to be the person to show the ad to. It's evolving. Facebook didn't really, I spoke to Facebook about this quite a lot, not just Facebook, also other digital platforms, and nobody really knew what they would end up with. Facebook's reined it back a little bit just recently. So they have other things you can choose. They were only allowing you like 8 different conversion results that you could track. So there's conversion events that you could track. Which is probably a bit too technical for this conversation, but there was all sorts of things they were doing that affected people's results, and there was a lot of comment online about how people's results had suffered. When it comes to clinical trials specifically, interestingly, the level of interests you could target there wasn't specifically health related, in the sense that you can target someone with diabetes, but you could target someone who had visited the Diabetes Foundation website, that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. Now, again, this is about Apple users, and they are not the majority of people in the world, don't use Apple iPhones. It seems like possibly most people use Apple iPhone than any other type of phone. That's possible. But I think Android is massively high across all the different phones. But it's a smaller percentage of most people's traffic, and it would only affect them. And there would be some of them who would have chosen it. So all this privacy issue, I mean, you could get bogged down with the Apple issue, particularly because obviously Google had mentioned they were deprecating cookies as well next year. Then they've put that back another year. So you get bogged down into it, but it's all about privacy. What it seems is likely to happen is things like that are going to come on and go on and on and on. Cookies will probably disappear at some point and not be accepted, but they'll be replaced by something that behaves almost identically to a cookie anyway. So it's the privacy is a good thing. I like the idea of it, and it makes a lot of sense. But it's pretty anonymized anyway. When I'm targeting people through Facebook or Google or YouTube, I don't know who they are. I can't tell who their
demographic
is. It's just within the anonymized data set. They know
clearly it's very successful. It reaps dividends and it gets patients recruited into clinical trials quicker.
It's one of those things that's why I think Facebook has worked really well, because it can do that and people see it and they go on, and so it's in this industry it's well worth.
Because it's one thing identifying people, it's another thing to really focus around that particular demographic, patient population, age group, whatever that might be, and then engage them to a point where they're retained, recruited, randomized, enter the clinical trial, and are likely to then maintain within that clinical trial, because that's the hardest thing, isn't it? It's getting a patient randomized, but it's also retaining them to come back visit after visit if they're an outpatient or whatever.
It's definitely true. Recruitment is the hardest thing, and then retaining them on the trial is possibly the second hardest thing. Up to 30% of people drop out of trials. So it's which is another reason I think the Prime Global Association is going to be really good, because their communication skill set and being able to tap into how they can translate complex medical information into layperson's language will help us to retain people on trials.
That clearly is the key. I mean, within all the CROs and companies I've worked with and alongside who deal with patient recruitment, those that are most successful seem to have medically qualified or personnel who have that understanding to interpret a protocol and decipher that in layperson speak, as you say, to patients, subjects, participants of clinical trials. That's the key, isn't it? As well, identifying them and then the messaging and the communication thereafter.
Yeah, and the people get hung up on the technology, and I was approached possibly every week over the last 9 months by somebody who'd done a new app. Look, this is brilliant about keeping people on trials, and gamification of clinical trials. People wanting to, but I mean, there's a lot of people who are on clinical trials who don't want to be on this smart.
What's gamification?
Gamification is where, so it's getting people to do something because it's like they're playing Candy Crush or whatever. At its very simple level, it might even be something like Alexa saying, "Have you taken your tablets today?" But it's about turning it into a thing that you might treat as a game.
Or a reward. A reward based upon that
make
action.
it, I guess that comes into that engagement side of things, though. I guess, get people on. Look, it's the same as, I guess, sort of my business of recruitment, which is staffing. The hardest part is finding the people, but then it comes down to, my clients or whatever company it is, or, in my own business, is keeping the people engaged and communication. So you're saying it's exactly the same with patient.
It sounds very transferable, actually, to recruitment.
Sounds exactly the same.
It really is, isn't it? I think.
I think definitely. I mean, there's possibly why the words recruitment are in both of the skills, I suppose. And I think one of the things about that is the gamification. People focus on technology again, but it doesn't have to be. This could be the reward could be somebody phoning you. If you get phoned up every 2 weeks, and it's more labor intensive, but if it saves 30% of people dropping out of the trial, it's worth doing. So there's lots of things. So the retention side of things is almost as important as the recruitment in terms of the effort that goes into it.
Wow. So look, I guess that's how you've been kind of building systems for people and helping them to recruit and engage with these patients. And that's the Ross Jackson method. And clearly you're a big fan of the Facebook side of things. Look, there must be clearly hundreds of patient recruitment companies out there. If it's anything like the staffing recruitment side of things, the competition it's staggering, right? So as the industry as a whole, and for you as an individual now with Prime, how has the impact of the virus affected, I guess, you and what you do? And I guess, how have you, I guess, stood out against your competitors, I guess, Ross? Because, this is something I get asked all the time is, why are you any different? What do you do? Why would we choose you? So look, if you could kind of give us an overview, sell if you like, as to, what is it about your method and how you go about things that is either different, better, and how have you fared during the pandemic?
Well, to look at what happened during the pandemic, I mean, I was working on some trials last March when everything went into lockdown, and they all stopped. A lot of the trials completely stopped and were paused, and carried on. So they've some of them have come back online, not all of them, but they're all paused. So that was a good opportunity for me to write my book. It's one of the means that I can stand out with, because I can point to this and say, look, I am acknowledged expert in this area because I've got this book, which I think people recognise there's an effort that goes into it, and you have to have a level of expertise to do it. Outside of that, I've worked on, I think my background is such that I've worked on trials where people have come at it from purely marketing or purely sales, and other people have come at it from a purely medical point of view. And actually, the combination of the two is what's required. So you can try and be very salesy, and that put people off, or you can be very medical and academic, and again, you're not going to attract so many people. So this sort of middle ground that I've pursued, really, where I have the knowledge about lead generation, I have the knowledge about what patients are interested in, is what really helps me to sell the service to people and get people interested in bringing me on board. And now not just me, but the team, with the patient engagement team.
Yeah. So would you say, has it got, I guess that there was, at the beginning, there was a drop off. I think that was unanimous across the board for most industries. What about now, as things are getting kind of back online, there's additional trials with COVID-19 and everyone trying to secure new vaccines, etc. How has it got bigger? Has the use of Facebook got bigger? Has the use of patient recruitment specialists like yourself or business wise, has that increased now, do you think? Has it become more competitive?
It's all of those things at the same time. It's the industry, obviously you can't just, well, you can stop the clinical trial, but it still needs to happen. So all these trials are back online. So there's a whole 6-9 months, whatever, where all these trials queued up. Now they all need to recruit the patients again, plus all the trials that were supposed to be happening. They all need to recruit the patients again. The general public, as I said, when I got into the industry, I wasn't overly familiar with the fact that clinical trials even existed. The whole world now knows that clinical trials exist. So this is, it's funny you mentioned the COVID. I was approached by 3 separate companies to promote their COVID trials last year. And I effectively told them, well, you don't need me at all, because this is on the news every day. You don't need me promoting to people, whether it's Facebook or any other method. You don't need me to actually tell people that a trial for COVID exists. They can't move without realizing it does. When I kept in touch with the companies, but I was right, they didn't need me to use me particularly. But it's become a factor now within the world. Everyone is aware that these things exist. There were people queuing around the block to take part in the COVID trials, and hopefully we can transfer that into trials for every condition.
I think to that point, Ross, I saw at the time something like 50,000 people recruited to COVID trials in the UK in the space of less than a week or something like that, wasn't it? The numbers were extraordinary, and we've talked about it with other guests on the pod around, the impact of COVID, but also the point that you made there around the language, that this is common parlance now. It's out there, it's in the public domain, it's on the news every day. Up until fairly recently, we had government ministers standing up at various podia talking about these to lay people. So it's become everyday parlance, as you say. So it's very interesting, though, on the flip side of that, it's a very competitive space, though, now, isn't it? Because people are now so aware of clinical trials. Maybe they're picking and choosing what they're doing, and maybe whereas people in the past weren't aware that you could be paid, for example, to do an early phase clinical trial in young healthy volunteers, for example, now they know about it. And yet many people might want to give up their payment or reimbursement for the good of clinical outcome, or for a good cause or whatever. Is that your experience? Is that what you've seen as well?
Yes, indeed. And I think when people are surveyed about it, the reimbursement is low down the list of the reasons why people take part in trials.
Whereas in the past, certainly, 10, 15 years ago, when I worked at that time in an early phase clinical trial unit, it was all out of work actors and students and medical students. And that was all we had. It was incredible. But it was literally, time after time after time, the same people coming back, and I would see them up and down the ward all the time, same faces. They couldn't be there all the time, but certainly within a 3-6 month period, there was this rotation of faces that I saw all the time.
Yeah, I know. Well, to an extent, it's still around in reality. I think phase 1 trials, it's primarily younger men who take part in them.
And there is a diversity conversation to be had around that as well, because I know that's also, very, very front and center at the moment around not just young, healthy volunteers, male, white, Caucasians, but every diversity, and certainly not just males, and certainly not, of a particular persuasion. That's a very key aspect of that. And I'd just be curious to know a little bit more about your experiences around that as well.
Yeah, so I've worked on a couple of trials where we've been trying to ensure inclusivity, and this is another debate that's happening within the industry. Should it be diversity or should it be inclusivity? And I think I probably prefer inclusivity myself. It makes sense because it's inclusive, whereas diversity means everybody's different. Inclusivity means everybody's the same. So you think, okay, that's a bit
nicer language. I agree.
I think it is, and it's. You can do things like that and you can try and do it, but fundamentally it's about a change within people's perception, which I think the COVID crisis is probably starting to chip away at it. So people think, okay, I mean, I know there's some anti-vaxxers and whatever else who think it's this is all a plot, and certainly within some ethnic minority communities, there is that belief that this is some kind of plot. But when you're looking at diversity and inclusion in general, I just think it's going to be more the norm. All the warp speed trials that the American government were paying for. I mean, they've had it in America for years and years. The inclusivity has to be part of the trial, but it was very front and center there. So I think that's going to be it's probably going to be adopted industry wide, I would think.
There's two words that I've just written down. One is homogeneity and the other is heterogeneity, which is namely the same or different.
Yeah.
And fundamentally, clinical trials run on the basis that, from an objective level, you want to compare apples with apples, and yet on the flip side, there is a very different discussion happening around how those protocols are designed and are built around bringing in a broader population of individuals into clinical trials more generally, isn't there?
There is, and I think that protocol design is one of the things that is probably going to have to change, because I think a lot of what happens is it is happening already. But I think a lot of the way people work is, right, here's a protocol, even take the protocol off the shelf and just use it for a similar trial in the future. Whereas that protocol might have been developed in the 1950s originally, and then they're still using similar types of things just bolted on. So reevaluating what the protocol is based on, I think, is one of the key factors. That's from the actual sponsors themselves, and then targeting the audience at the rate at the recruitment level that I get involved in. Yeah, we need to make sure that this is as inclusive as possible, because some of these treatments affect different types of people in different ways.
They very much do. And sorry, just to make that point, but I used to work in this unit where we would run these things called bridging studies. So you'd have white Caucasians on one side of the ward and Japanese or Southeast Asian on the other side, be dosing them at the same time and see different reactions at dosing. Yep. Absolutely crystallizing. Wow. To see it is incredible, but genuinely, dosing at the same time, side by side. Now, of course, you can't do that either now, since what happened all those years ago in the clinical trial where everyone was dosed at the same time and they all had awful outcomes. But as I say, that was my experience on bridging studies as well, and I learned an awful lot from that experience. Just to literally see them in the same room being dosed at the same time.
It sounds like there's a lot of red tape involved with this, Gent. Certainly not an area that there's as much on, I guess, my side of things, talking just staff and recruitment. Ross, what of those, it seems like there's quite a few challenges for you there. Diversity and inclusion is just getting more and more widespread as a topic on itself, and you could have a whole nother show on that alone, I think. But of the challenges that you've perhaps faced, what's been the biggest one for you over the past 18 months? And what has that taught you about yourself?
I think it's the challenge has been, well, there's the obvious challenge of everything coming to a halt and then having to work out what to do, but I managed to get over that. The big challenges in terms of what I'm doing in recruitment is the regulation. Now, it is actually speeding up, interestingly. Some of you have to get everything approved by ethics committees, and during the COVID times, the ethics committees got faster. which is surprising, possibly because they didn't have as many other things to do. So they were able to run through them quicker. But that's a big challenge, just getting things worked out quickly so you can get recruitment started as soon as possible, getting protocols designed, getting actually, for myself, actually getting the legal things in place that you are allowed to work with the firms. There's a very old-fashioned thing with a lot of these sponsors where, you need to have lots of money in the bank before they'll deal with it, all those kind of things. You've got to have all this financial backing. So it's, as a freelancer, that's never been that easy to do. So I've usually piggybacked alongside someone else. Now with Prime Global, that's going to be an interesting one because they already have scope of work arrangements and things like that with a lot of the pharma companies. So that should be easy. What I've learned about it, I think, is to get on and do something. That's basically where, so when I put the book together, I was thinking, right, so I need to do something. I might as well take this knowledge I've got and put it out there. It's been useful. I mean, I've spoken with site owners who've used it and actually recruited patients from reading what I've said in the book, which is great. So I've used it. It's a double thing. It helped to promote me to people and get my name out there a bit more, but also it's helped people who need the service.
It certainly sounds like a useful one. I think being able to recruit in any industry is just so valuable. And I know for trials, getting patients on is, anyone who can help with patient recruitment is always just such a valuable person to have on side, because otherwise things aren't going to move.
Yes, it's one thing because with patient engagement, which has become patient engagement has become a bit of a buzzword over the last few years. And a lot of the companies still think it's a nice to have rather than a needs to have, having patient centricity at the heart of a trial, patient engagement being, asking the patients what they want out of the trial and getting them involved at protocol design level. All those things are very valuable. Patient recruitment, on the other hand, is an essential. Without patient recruitment, there is no pharmaceutical industry. So it's it's one of those things where people understand that they need someone good at patient recruitment, but it's still so difficult, which is where, just coming back to your point earlier on about it being so competitive, there is enough business out there. There's enough people running clinical trials. I mean, 300,000 odd clinical trials being run in 2020, something like that. So it's risen exponentially over the last 20 years. There's enough clinical trials business out there for lots of patient recruitment firms, and hopefully the good ones rise to the top and carry on better.
What do you think is next then for you and for patient recruitment as we continue to move on? Because I know that, I guess, outside of the podcast, we've had various chats, and I know that decentralized trials are becoming more talked about. It's all over LinkedIn every single day. Mm-hmm. How is that going to impact, I guess, what you do? How is that going to change the market? What are your thoughts on that for, I guess, someone who is I guess not an industry expert like myself? I guess the question probably to both of you, really, what are your thoughts on how that's going to evolve?
Decentralization is something that's been around for ages and probably could have happened 10 years ago, but didn't happen that much. COVID has brought it to the fore, as it has with so many other things. It's a very good development. It's a great evolution of trials. Two main reasons, I think, for that is one, from my own personal standpoint, it's much easier to recruit people if you can target them wherever they are, rather than having to, normally they have to attend a research site, so they have to be within traveling distance. So in this country, perhaps a little bit easier because there's quite a lot of research sites around. Not every country has that. I've done work in America where the nearest research site is 500 miles away, so you're not going to get people. You have to target people within 30 to 50 miles of the site. So decentralization, where people can have the trial either at their local doctor or in their own home, or a combination of those things, is going to be great for recruiting patients. It's also great for the patient.
Or dare I say it, virtually, Ross?
Exactly, virtually like that. So
through a virtual screen.
Exactly. If you can, I mean, if in their own home, through a virtual screen, I guess that's one of the key factors. I think there is no reason that this can't happen for a lot of trials. I mean, there's some trials where you would need to go into a centre that had specific equipment, but a lot of trials you wouldn't. And then if you can get it done via your local doctor as well, again, why not? But it's much more patient friendly. It's patient interested.
All of this feeds into the patient recruitment funnel, doesn't it? Effectively, it gives you a broader population that you can select from, rather than in the past where you had a much smaller selection and potentially a smaller pot to then filter down into that recruitment funnel that we talk about all the time. So I think, to answer your question as well, James, all it does is it puts it more and more available. It makes clinical trials more and more available to the public. It retains that interest in drug development. It makes our jobs easier, dare I say it, because it is completely front and center, and it probably will never go away now. That visual, the visual experience that people have had of seeing and hearing this language all the time has embedded it in this generation, and probably generation 10s, but certainly never more than now, I would say. Wouldn't you, Ross?
Oh, I definitely agree. I think there's the awareness of clinical trials is so much more. And if there will be lots of people think, oh, I'd like to take part in a clinical trial. But if they think, oh, I've got to travel to somewhere 80 miles away, I don't fancy that. Well, if they think, oh, I don't have to do that, maybe I can get a smartphone app even, or something, maybe they can do it, a virtual hybrid decentralized trial, then that's going to encourage more people to volunteer for trials.
But dare I say it also, there's 20% more kids leaving school and going to universities, applying for dentistry and medicine degrees now this year alone in the UK. So that in itself speaks to that point, doesn't it? That it is absolutely centered people's opinions or people's thoughts and their direction with regards to the STEM subjects and the opportunities that may then lead thereafter. So it kind of all filters and feeds into that opportunity, doesn't it?
Sounds huge, because all I'm hearing is increased awareness, increased access, increased supply.
Yes.
So the market is only going one way, and that is through the roof by the sounds of it, gents.
It is, and also there's another interesting development going alongside that with clinical trials, in that there's a lot more interest now from the pharmas and the biotechs in targeting rare diseases, which there wasn't before. And lots of people have rare diseases. Not lots of people have a single rare disease, but you put them all together and there's lots of people around. So there's a lot more opportunity to take part in a trial, a lot more possible treatments coming down the track.
We speak and have spoken to a number of companies and individuals who are working in and around the rare disease space. I've also done that myself, Ross. And to that point, patient advocacy has never been greater. The discussion forums have never been more engaged with parents and children and individuals looking for compassionate use drugs and off-label marketing of these medications. So it all speaks to the same point that you've made there, James, which is that people are just aware, so much more aware. We are so health conscious, and we are perhaps some people are making good choices, some people are not, but certainly they're aware of the implications of those good or bad choices now.
Fantastic. No, well, look, for me, it all sounds like fantastic news for the industry as a whole. That's the main thing. And as we've each said, there's so many top class individuals working in the industry. It's just great to hear that there is that increased awareness, and hopefully going to be more and more in future. But look, Ross, I'm sure we could probably talk about this and the Facebook ads and algorithms forever and a day. So maybe we may well have to get you back on at some point. But look, before we let you go, we always like to wrap up the show with a quick fire round. So I'll kick us off with question number one. And I guess, look, you've talked us through your past, but if you were to give yourself one piece of advice as your younger self, what would that be?
I think it's something we've touched on earlier. It's take opportunities as they come. I think I had various opportunities that I didn't take, which would have led me to a different path than I got to here. But I could have got to where I am now and enjoying this earlier. But I could have been somewhere else and doing other things earlier as well. So I think I did manage to take the opportunity to get into digital marketing, but I sort of went like this a bit, where I could have gone there and then here, and I could have been. So take the opportunities as they present themselves.
Well, that kind of take exactly what you're saying about your book. Just take action. You'll then get to where you're going faster.
Yeah.
Like it.
That sounds like there might be a connection with the philosophy background in you, which we haven't touched upon, but I've also seen in your profile as well. So there is a thinker and a philosopher there going on as well.
That's a fair point. Yeah.
I'll move on to the next question around. Well, dare I ask, apart from the book that you've obviously written and is very successful, what other book would you have or recommend to our listeners that they should be reading right now and maybe on your bedside table?
I've actually got 2 books here. Sorry, so it's sort of, it comes into the combination of what I do in the patient recruitment world. So there's a classic advertising text called Scientific Advertising, written by Claude C. Hopkins, ludicrously in 1923.
Wow.
But it's anyone reading it today, it's quite a short book. You read it today, it's all about tracking this kind of stuff that everyone would recognize from Google advertising and that sort of digital marketing. So it's about that sort of data and using the data to target your audience. So I've built that into what I do. The other one is a book by Ken Getz called The Gift of Participation, which is aimed at patients who are going to participate in trials. And it's a great read for anyone in the recruitment and clinical trials industry for what motivates people, what they should expect. And I think I try and combine the messages from both those books into what I do.
Motivation is everything, isn't it? In whatever we do.
Yeah.
And clearly identifying that and trying to drill in and get to the crux of the matter with your patients, with the individuals you're trying to engage with is key, isn't it? It's understanding what makes them tick, really.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Super.
Fantastic
Thank you.
stuff. And look, I guess you've been an independent worker for so many years, but you're now, I guess the job title is quite grandiose, Vice President of, was it patient recruitment or was it patient
recruitment services? Yeah.
Patient recruitment services. There we go. So look, you may well be building a team in a not too distant future. What are the top 3 qualities that you'll perhaps be, valuing most when putting together that team, or just in general, Ross?
Well, because I mean, I've been looking at building the team, and I'm trying to, we're trying to build the engagement and recruitment service within Prime Global. So, yeah, one thing I know from having worked with teams previously, being personable, being easy to get on with is really a key factor. There's no point working with people you just don't get on with if you can avoid it, especially when you're building your own team. It just makes perfect sense to do that. Another thing I was thinking was enthusiasm. So people can learn how to do something, but having the enthusiasm to do it is always going to be a good thing in the first place. So the motivation, as Adam mentioned before, motivation, enthusiasm, that is going to be another key factor. I think it's also the what I've noticed a few times, and even for myself a few years ago, and hopefully have developed a bit, is the awareness to perhaps you need to ask for some clarification on something. So if you feel like you understand something but you're not entirely sure, it doesn't hurt to just ask somebody and clarify it. So that sort of awareness that, well, I don't know everything, but I know how to find out by asking someone who does know what I want to know.
Definitely. No, I like that. And I think it's the confidence to almost say, I don't know everything.
Yeah.
I regularly have to ask that question as a consultant. I'm always making sure and validating that the approach I'm taking makes sense to the company or the person that I'm serving at the time. And as you say, I think there is a lot to be gained from actually saying, have I understood you correctly? I think you said this. Did you mean this, or did you actually mean this? And give people solutions, options, and different avenues that they can, pick and choose from, because I think that's key to getting a good outcome, certainly.
You save so much time in having to go back and unwind if you've got it the wrong way to go start again. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So dare I ask, when you're not working, what is it you enjoy doing? What's your favorite thing that you enjoy doing outside of work?
It's a tricky one. This, I think it's a bit. Socializing is probably my favorite thing to do outside of work. Now, obviously, not been doing loads of that over the last 18 months. So I've done other things, but I do like writing, not just non-fiction books. I like to write stories. I've written the odd song here and there, so I like being creative. I do those sort of things. But yeah, I think socializing is probably the most fun thing that I would like to get to do more of again.
We'd all like to do a bit more of that.
Yeah.
I went to 2 birthday parties this weekend, and one was an 18th and one was my dad's 88th. So there were 70 years between them, and
Wow.
yet the audience was the same and everyone wanted to have a good time.
Kids.
Love it. So simple. And look, Ross, to wrap us up for the show, finally, what is your number one golden rule for life and for business?
I think it's a combination of, and it perhaps goes back to the philosophical point actually, because I've been trying to be a bit more stoic, introduce a bit more stoicism into my life over the last few years. So it's sort of, don't take things too seriously, but something that sounds like it is really seriously, which is memento mori, which literally translated means remember you will die, which is not a morbid thing. It just means, this is not a rehearsal for life, so make the most of what you're doing. It was actually, that wasn't the origin of where it came from. This is when emperors were being applauded for successes, etc. But it's be calm down a bit. But I think it also can be used for, remember that, do whatever you can at the time you've got available to do it, because you may not have the time to do it in the future.
Great point.
Like it.
Great point.
Like it. Well, look, Ross, it has been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. I think for a change, I think it was yourself who reached out to me and we connected and just started networking on LinkedIn. And I was, very much intrigued to understand a bit more about the man who literally wrote the book on patient recruitment. So look, thanks very much for coming on the show and I guess sharing your story and talking us through how it all works, because it's been a bit of an education for me. I'm sure it has for plenty of our audience. But look, once again, Ross, thank you very much for coming on the Huxley Morton podcast.
Thank you very much as well. That's been great. I've enjoyed it.
Great stuff.